Hey people, Shinobi no Kami here. In this fanfic, Naruto trains a lot harder than the canon and strives to become the best. This story starts right after the Sasuke retrieval mission. Hope you enjoy this fanfic. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment if you want to suggest any other fanfics for me to read. Check the description for credits and support the creator of this story. So let us begin. Chapter 19. Tobi, Deidara is dead, Zetsu reported to the rest of the Akatsuki members, his projected image flickering a little as he spoke. He decided to end the battle by turning himself into a bomb. Oh my, Kisame said with a shark-like grin. It seems we've lost another member, eh? I thought he was pretty strong too. Over on the other side of the cavern that he and his partner were resting in, Itachi opened his eyes to reveal the Sharingan as he looked around at the rest of the members. Sensing his partner's eyes on him but not really paying attention, Kisame continued. So, who is it that killed him off? Was it Sasuke, or was it the Kyuubi Jinchuriki? It was Sasuke, reported Zetsu, however it seems Sasuke was killed in the explosion as well. Itachi's eyes flashed as the plant-like man reported that. Only Konan managed to catch it as she was doing her best to pay attention to the proceedings around her and the reaction the other members had to the news. She was sure that knowledge on her comrades' disposition would help Naruto when the time came to fight them. So, Deidara dragged Sasuke along with him into hell, huh? Said Kisame. You should be grateful, Itachi, Pain said from where his projection stood. Deidara died while preventing any unnecessary hindrances. This Kisame also took notice when Itachi's eyes flashed at the leader. Grinning, the shark-like man said, is it just me, or are we missing someone besides Deidara? Tobi died as well, said Zetsu. Deidara decided to destroy everything indiscriminately. Konan did her best to keep herself from reacting to that information. She knew who Tobi really was, there was no way that man had been killed. She absently wondered if he was getting ready to cast of his disguise. If so, she would need to warn Naruto about it. Oh, right, Tobi, Kisame said, sounding as if he had just remembered, all the while the grin stayed on his face. I'm actually a little surprised he died, the kid always seemed to have some escape route handy. But I guess his number just came up, huh? That must have been one hell of a jutsu. It doesn't matter, Pain decided, there are plenty of people around Toba's level that we can choose from to replace him. However, Deidara was valuable. I don't know, Kisame said in a pleasant tone, I rather enjoyed having Tobi around. He had a knack for turning this gloomy organization into something a bit more cheerful. Pain just sighed, I'm leaving. At least mourn for Deidara in silence. Pain's image disappeared and soon enough, Konan's vanished as well. Zetsu stayed long enough to leave a parting comment. In that case I will take care of Toba's funeral. It's time for us to go. When the plant-like man had left, only Itachi and Kisame remained, as they were the only two figures that had been at the meeting that were not projections, being the ones who had carried to Jinchuriki to the cave in the first place. Oi, Itachi, you alright? Asked Kisame, actually getting a tad creeped out by the way his partner was glaring at nothing. Itachi turned to him with the three tomo of his Sharingan spinning, causing the shark man to actually take a step back. You know, you can be pretty scary when you want to. As always, Itachi said nothing. Naruto frowned as he looked at the 2-kilometer-wide crater. He was the first one of his team to have gotten here and had done his best to scout the area around and in the crater in search of Sasuke or the Akatsuki member. So far he had not had any luck. But then again, what was he expecting to find at a place that had been the center of a 2-kilometer-wide explosion? From the way the crater looks, there was a small, more concentrated explosion first, Naruto thought to himself as he analyzed the ring that had formed within the crater. After that it had spread out and destroyed everything else. A sigh escaped his lips. Even with my limited skills at sensing chakra I can feel the amount of residue from Deidara, but I don't sense much of Sasuke. The other chakra is overpowering his. Not that it would have made much of a difference, even if he had been able to detect Sasuke's chakra there wouldn't have been much he could do about that. Naruto! The shout came from behind him and the whiskered blonde turned around to see the other tracking squads coming out of the trees. Sakura ran over to him and stopped at his side, breathing a tad heavier than normal due to her rush to get over here. What happened here? I believe Sasuke was fighting the Akatsuki member known as Deidara, Naruto said. I can detect faint traces of his chakra mixed in with the bombers. Unfortunately, it's so overpowering that even if my sensor abilities were up to snuff, I wouldn't be able to track him with it. Kiba. He turned to the dog using ninja. Can you pick up anything? It's faint, but I can smell Sasuke here, Kiba said, his feet subconsciously snapping to attention at the commanding tone in the blonde's voice. I can also smell the scent of two other people that were here. Well, we already know one of them was Deidara. Naruto frowned as he looked at the large blast crater. He's the only one capable of creating a bomb like this. His frown deepened. The other is likely a newer recruit, since their numbers have already been cut down by 4 as 3 of them had died and Orochimaru left. Konan had informed him that Madara was Deidara's partner, having taken on the alias of Tobi. But he didn't want to cause a panic by telling his team that in order to get to Sasuke they would in all likelihood have to fight the greatest traitor Konoha had since its founding. I can pick up another scent, said the small white dog that had chosen to travel with Sakura. It belongs to the one that had been carrying Sasuke's scent in town earlier. It seems that Sasuke has gained a traveling companion sometime since killing Orochimaru. That means that Sasuke has formed his own group. Everyone turned their attention to Naruto as he spoke. He likely realized that fighting against Itachi without backup is tantamount to suicide, what with Kisame around. Even if Sasuke had the power to beat Itachi, he wouldn't stand a chance against both him and Kisame. Are you saying that you don't think Sasuke-kun can defeat Itachi? Asked Sakura, not quite sure how she should feel about Naruto's statement. Let's just put it this way, Sakura, Naruto replied with a humorless chuckle. Sasuke could get 100 times stronger than he was before, but 100 times 0 is still 0. The fact of the matter is, when I fought both Sasuke and Orochimaru, the skills he displayed only amount to an A-rank shinobi, and that was with his Sharingan active. Itachi is on the higher scale of an S rank. He is one of the few ninja that carry the same strength as a Kage on the same level as Sarutobi when he was in his prime. Of course, he was neglecting the fact that Sasuke had his cursed seal form, but he doubted Itachi would let him use it, and even then he doubted the older Sharingan user would lose. Shaking his head, the blonde continued, it would take a hell of a miracle for Sasuke to win a fight against Itachi. Sakura's face gained a slightly constipated look, like she was warring between trying to defend her crush, or giving in to the fact of cold hard facts. Naruto turned his attention to the nin dogs after having sufficiently cowed the pink-haired girl. Can you pick up any trace of Sasuke's scent? He asked Pakun. No, the little pug said, I'm afraid not, Sasuke's scent ends here. Which means one of two things: Sasuke died in the explosion, Naruto ignored the gasp of shock and hurt that came from Sakura. Or he used a Jikuken, space-time, ninjutsu of some kind to escape. That brought up a few complications. While there were actually quite a few Jikugen ninjutsu, they were all difficult to master. Well, almost all. Not many ninja knew that the most basic academy jutsu, the Kariwimi, was in all reality a low E-ranked Jikuken technique. He likely used some form of reverse summoning to escape. Naruto narrowed his eyes as his mind began oming up with a plausible theory. I doubt even Orochimaru had many Jikuken ninjutsu in his arsenal, however all summoners have basic space-time abilities thanks to their contracts. Creating a reverse summoning technique isn't that difficult if they use the original Kuchio's no Jutsu as a base. But that would require 2 people, since it would need 2 scrolls to work. The user would create a gateway with the scrolls being a gate and the space in between would be the bridge. The person with the other scroll would have to finish the technique by releasing the second gateway. It would explain why Sasuke had a team, a contingency in case he needed a quick escape. Well, say what you will about him, but at least Sasuke hasn't totally lost his mind. At least, if he really didn't escape and wasn't blown to hell. Kiba, can you extend your senses and try and pick up Sasuke's scent? Asked Naruto, turning his attention to the dog using ninja. Over on the sidelines, Kakashi watched the young blonde analyzing and mulling over the situation. For a brief moment, he felt like he was standing next to his sensei again as the blonde began taking charge of the situation. You really have grown, Naruto, thought the silver-haired Jonin. I can try, Kiba replied as he closed his eyes and made a hand seal. Kiba stretched his senses to their limit, straining to find any trace of Sasuke. After a few moments, his eyes snapped open and he looked at Naruto. It looks like you're right, he said. Right now my nose has a greater sense of smell than even most nin dogs. I've found Sasuke. Nice going Kiba, Naruto complimented before he gave the order, lead the way. Kiba nodded before he took off, with the others soon following him back into the trees. Konan watched as Nagato, she shook her head, the God Realm path that had once been her best friend and the person she had loved more than anything in the world, Yahiko, sat with one leg dangling off the side while the other was propped up and being used as an arm rest. Before she had met Naruto, she had seen Nagato's desire to use the body of Yahiko as a way to ensure that their friend lived on. But after having her eyes open to the truth, after realizing that what they were doing was the last thing Yahiko would have wanted, she saw it more as a perversion of their friend than anything. It almost nauseated her every time she had to be near the body now. Shaking her thoughts off, she called out, "Pain, he's here." She watched as the man rose from his sitting position and walked to her, stopping when he reached the lip that separated the inside of the building from the balcony he had been sitting on. "So, how is Sasuke?" asked Pain as he stared at the figure who was secretly heading the Akatsuki. "He's progressing nicely," the man said. His voice, once childish and enthusiastic, had taken on a slightly mocking quality. "He was able to use the full power of the Sharingan well. I have no doubt that his eyes will surpass Itachi's. The time is drawing near. Soon I will have his path laid out before him, though I suppose a part of that is up to Itachi. There isn't much time left for him after all." Pain took a step forward. "And what of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki?" he asked. "It has becoming more of a pain in our side than we had anticipated." The way Pain called Naruto, it, as if the blonde wasn't even a person, made Konan burn with anger. She reminded herself that both of the people with her had a powerful dujutsu that would read her emotions easily if she showed even a flicker. It was only that knowledge that allowed her to keep her face completely impassive and her body language unresponsive. "Yes, the Namikaze," Madara spat out the name like it was the most foul thing he had ever tasted. "He has grown more powerful than I could have thought possible. You will deal with him, Pain. As the leader of Akatsuki, failure from you won't be tolerated." "I'm picking up his scent." Kiba called back to the others following him as he rode on top of his nin dog partner Akamaru, so that he could focus on tracking Sasuke. "There's no mistaking it. Judging by the way his scent is moving, they must be resting somewhere." "Sasuke was likely injured during the battle," Naruto commented. "To be honest, I'm still surprised he won in the first place. He likely needs some time to recover from his wounds, so this will be our chance to find him." The others all nodded at his words, trusting in the blonde Jinchuriki as they continued moving closer to Sasuke's scent. "Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto," Madara said, his voice carrying both cold disdain and grudging respect. "He's no longer a helpless little child. Not only has he made friends with many people, including those from hidden villages that he doesn't belong to, many of which hold high-ranking positions like the Mizukage and the Raikage. He has also mastered many powerful jutsu. With the Hiraishin and that Rasengan of his, along with the power of the Kyuubi, he is in all likelihood more powerful than even his father had been. The Yondaime Hokage, one of the few men that had been able to stand up to Madara. Now his son was who they had to face, and he would be an even more dangerous opponent. Defeating him will not be an easy task. He has managed to kill off 2 of our members that we know of, and I believe he was the reason that we were unable to capture the Shukaku Jinchuriki." "You speak of him as if he is some kind of threat," Konan stated coldly. She didn't particularly like talking badly about her Naruto, but she needed to keep appearances. "Pain has never lost a battle." The man just gave a light chuckle. "Well, that is true," he admitted. "Then again, ever since his training trip, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto hasn't lost a battle either." The man walked over to a coat hanger and grabbed his Akatsuki robes, throwing them on. "I believe our business is done here," he said as he began adjusting his outfit. "Tell the others to hurry up and capture their Jinchuriki. But leave the 2 and 1 tails alone until we have the Kyuubi. If he is protecting them, then we stand no chance of capturing them until he has been taken care of." "I understand," Pain said. "We are close to achieving our goal," he said, walking towards the balcony as a storm began to form in the sky above. "Then, everything will go back to the way it's supposed to be." He stepped onto the lip as the rain began to pour down on the city of Omegakure, pelting the balcony as lightning flashed in the sky. "Soon, I will show the true power of the Sharingan. The true power of me, Uchiha Madara." Conan almost snorted as she heard the egotistical boast. Thankfully she was able to hold it in as Madara ran out to the balcony before disappearing in a space-time distortion. Looking at the rain and resisting a frown, she said, "The sky is crying again." She looked over at the man she could no longer follow, Pain. "I can only hope that somehow Naruto can save you." Tsunade and Shizune were interrupted from their daily routine. Namely Tsunade trying to find some way to distract herself from the paperwork she had to do while Shizune tried to make her do the paperwork she wanted to distract herself from, by a knock on the door. "I'm Koning in Suheim," came the familiar voice called out before Jiraiya opened the door and entered. "Jiraiya," Tsunade greeted as she pushed the paperwork away as a new distraction made itself known. It was about the only thing her perverted teammate was good for in her estimation. "Did you find out anything from your spy network?" Jiraiya finished walking in and stopped in front of her desk, a rare look of seriousness settling on his face. "I found the whereabouts of the Akatsuki leader," he stated, causing a look of shock to rise onto the faces of the two medic nin. "Really?" asked Tsunade in a loud voice. She stood up and pushed her chair away with the back of her knees as she planted her hands on the desk and leaned over with a serious look on her face. "Tell me everything you know, Jiraiya. Don't hold back any information you have." This was a serious breakthrough. If he knew where the leader of Akatsuki was, they may be able to take him out and defeat the Red Dawn in the process. Cut off the head and the body will fall, as it were. Shizune seemed to have a similar idea as she said, "We should use that information to plan a surprise attack." Now, take it easy," Jiraiya said as his laid-back manner returned. He held up his hands in a gesture for them to calm down. "Calm down," said Tsunade incredulous. She held up a hand as her fingers began twitching, almost as if she wanted to strangle the white-haired man in front of her. "This isn't like making the sequel to one of your novels, Jiraiya. We can't afford to waste time. Naruto's life was dependent on the defeat of Akatsuki. They needed to take that group out before she could name the whiskered blonde her successor, damn it. Nothing good can come from being impatient, you know," Jiraiya said dryly. "Especially when the stakes are as high as this." A grin crossed his face as he continued, "Now, what do you say you and me go out for a few drinks like the old days, huh? Then we can talk." A large tick mark formed on Tsunade's face as she yelled, "Yubaka." The blonde's hand shot up and she pointed an accusing finger at her longtime friend and teammate, "I'm the Hokage. I can't just go out and drink during the middle of the day." Shizune's sweat dropped at her sensei's words as she thought, "You go out and drink all the time anyways. Don't you feel any shame thinking about going out and drinking while many of our ninja are out taking dangerous and life-threatening missions?" Less than an hour later Tsunade had just finished gulping down an entire bottle of sake. "Ah. Now that hit the spot," she said with a grin as she slammed the bottle down onto the table. Jiraiya felt a rather large sweat drop forming on his head as he watched Tsunade wipe her mouth with her hand. There was a light blush spreading across her face as a sign that she was feeling a buzz. He looked down at the floor to see the 9 sake bottles his teammate had already downed. "You should really practice what you preach, Suheim," he mumbled, wondering if her large breasts were the reason she seemed capable of drinking so much without passing out. He leaned his head on the butt of his palm as he continued, "And you're drinking straight from the bottle. You should act a little more responsible. You are the Hokage after all." "Kiba. How close are we?" asked Naruto as he and the others jumped through the trees. "Naruto, I need you to stop distracting me," Kiba complained. "I'm focusing on his scent as hard as I can, but there's very little of it left." "Right, sorry," Naruto scratched the back of his head before sighing. He wasn't normally this anxious, but he couldn't help it at the moment. If they managed to capture Sasuke, he could finally gain some closure from all of this, and his estranged teammate could finally be brought to justice for what he had done. Suigetsu looked around the room and sighed. It had been pure luck that Sasuke had been able to summon Manda at the last second and activate that space-time jutsu to escape from the large explosion. Honestly, he had been positive that the Uchiha had been killed in that explosion. It had only been the contingency plan that Sasuke had come up with and told Suigetsu to carry out even if it looked like he was dead that kept the water user from just assuming the worst. Afterwards he had managed to reverse summon the raven-haired ninja, via the scroll and blood he had been given to complete the technique, while Karen and Jugo tracked him with the redhead's sensing abilities. Soothfully Suigetsu thought that was the only thing the girl was good for, though were it not for Sasuke wanting her to be kept alive the sword user likely would have killed the annoying girl by now. They had managed to take Sasuke to an inn where he could rest and heal. Hopefully it wouldn't take too long though, because Suigetsu was getting bored. He looked at the sleeping Uchiha before looking over at Jugo, who currently had a flock of birds on him. He was probably communing with the raided animals or something. Jugo, he said, getting the orange-haired ninja's attention. I'm going to go and look for Karen. He stood up and made his way to the door as the larger man acknowledged his words with a nod. Suigetsu reached out for the small hole that would pull the sliding door open, when it was knocked off its hinges, smashing into his face and causing him to fall to the floor. He tried to get up but a foot smashed on the door and stayed there, keeping the water-using ninja from being able to get up. What the hell? Muttered Suigetsu. Wake up, Sasuke! Shouted Karen as she continued to unknowingly squashing Suigetsu. Not that she would have cared even if she did know. We've been followed. What should we do? Sasuke blinked as he turned to look over at Karen who just blushed and raised a hand to her face. Even when he just wakes up, he's so hot. We're leaving. Sasuke made his decision and sat up. Get ready. Jugo, mark all of the Akatsuki hideouts that we know of on the map. Jugo nodded and several minutes later the four of them were on the move. You alright Sasuke? Asked Suigetsu, noticing the bandages the Uchiha still had on. I'm fine, Sasuke said as he threw a cloak over his body. My body's ability to heal became a lot faster after I gained Orochimaru's abilities. I guess this is the power of the white snake. Whoever is following us, whether it's Akatsuki or Konoha, they may have information on Itachi, commented Karen as she looked at her not-so-secret crush. It may be a good idea to ambush them. What do you think, Sasuke? If their numbers are as large as you said then it's most likely Konoha, said Sasuke. Akatsuki always move in groups of two. So ambushing them would probably be just a big waste of time, right? Asked Suigetsu. Exactly, we'll just ignore them for now, said Sasuke. So, what should we do? Asked Karen. We'll find Itachi, Sasuke said, taking a scroll out from underneath his robes. In the worst-case scenario, you guys will have to hold off the Konoha shinobi. He knew that they would likely die if that were to happen. If Konoha was after him there was only one person they would send. And if he was here, then even these three combined would be no match for him. Not that it mattered to Sasuke, some sacrifices had to be made for his ambitions. For now, we move as Hubby. He held up the scroll, which was revealed to be a map of the area. We'll use Jugo's information to check out the Akatsuki hideouts one by one. Let's go. As Sasuke and Suigetsu left, Karen placed a hand on Jugo's shoulder. Hold on for a moment, she said as the large orange-haired man turned to face her. I want you to do something for me. What are you planning? He asked curiously. A grin formed on Karen's face as she held up a pair of sweaty and smelly clothes. These are the clothes Sasuke was wearing earlier and they're drenched in his sweat. Why are you holding onto Sasuke's old clothes? Asked Jugo. What he really wanted to ask was, what the hell is wrong with you, since only someone who was seriously fucked up in the head would bother keeping a pair of someone else's used clothing, especially when it smelled as bad as the pair she was holding. Karen seemed to realize this fact as well and tried to cover up her stalker-like tendencies. And no special reason, you idiot, she shouted as he held her glasses to her face. Kiba sniffed several times as he sensed something change. What's wrong Kiba? Asked Naruto as he noticed this while jumping alongside the dog-using ninja. Sasuke's on the move again, he informed everyone. Naruto had to frown as he wondered why Sasuke would start moving so soon after his battle with an S-class ninja. He has to be injured from a battle of that caliber, Naruto frowned. Is he really stupid enough to go after Itachi in his condition? Either he is and doesn't care, has a good medical ninja within his squad, or he may have a censor on his team, the blonde informed his comrades. If so there's a very high possibility that he sensed us coming and is moving to get away from us. We'll need to hurry if that's the case. Wait. Kiba shouted, there's something wrong here. Sasuke's scent is splitting up. It's going off in multiple directions. They must have caught onto us, said Kakashi as Naruto came to the same conclusion. They're likely using this as a means of distraction, they want to divert our attention to trying to find the real Sasuke while they get away clean. That means they do have a powerful sensor shinobi at their side, Naruto said. Someone who was skilled enough to recognize that not all of the chakra signatures here are human. Whoever it is was somehow able to realize that we're using nin dogs to track them as split Sasuke's scent somehow. Whoever he has on his side is powerful asset, the blonde thought to himself, I've never heard of someone with sensing abilities that powerful. The distance between all of the different scents is too great for us to use our radios, said Kiba. I don't even think the nin dogs have that kind of hearing range. And I'm the only one who can track him, but I can only go after one scent. Are you forgetting who you're talking to? Asked Naruto as his hands came up in the ram seal that he had made famous, or infamous depending on who you asked, before he left for his training trip. I'm a one-man army. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. There were nearly several hundred puffs of smoke as the blonde Jonin created a mass amount of Kage Bunshin. Already having their orders, the clones shot off and began their search for Sasuke. Everyone looked at the mass amount of Kage Bunshin and nearly shook their head as they remembered how the blonde had abused this jutsu in his youth. The search continued and the Konoha teams moved through the trees. Naruto stiffened a little as he sensed a presence lurking in the shadows somewhere. No one else seemed to have noticed, it was as if whoever was hiding only wanted to reveal themselves to him. Acting with all the skills in stealth and finesse he had gained during his training period, Naruto swapped himself out with a Kage Bunshin so no one would suspect he was gone. For a while anyways. If Kakashi got his Sharingan out they would no doubt notice he was missing, but the blonde Jinchuriki figured he could find out who was tailing him and get back before they truly noticed. Naruto landed on the ground and stopped in the middle of a very small clearing. A tri-pronged kunai shot out of his sleeve before he said, you know, I kind of figured you'd be heading towards your confrontation with Sasuke, Itachi. It seems not much gets by you these days. You have grown quite powerful, Namikazu Uzumaki Naruto. Itachi stepped out from behind the tree he had been hiding against, his Sharingan eyes were already out and Naruto wondered if he should expect a fight of some kind. I kind of have to be on the ball Itachi, Naruto said in a casual manner, though his eyes had narrowed and his body was coiled to strike at the slightest sign of aggression. After all, I have a bunch of S-ranked ninja after the Kyuubi, and I have no desire to die from having it ripped out of my seal. Indeed, Itachi said in the same monotone voice he had always used. Judging from the fact that you haven't attacked me yet, I'm going to go out on a limb and say your being here has nothing to do with Akatsuki, said Naruto. He knew Itachi wasn't stupid, they both knew that with the Hiraishin and the blonde's ability to use Kyuubi's chakra to dispel genjutsu that Itachi stood no chance against him. As good as the man was, he just didn't have the same advantages against the whisker-marked Tokubetsu Jonin anymore. If he were with Kisame then it might be a different story, but without that month's large chakra reserves backing Itachi up the most the raven-haired man could hope for was a standstill. You are correct, Itachi said, I was merely hoping to talk with you. So, talk, said Naruto, gesturing for the man to start speaking. I have a question, Itachi started, what do you intend to do with my Ototo? Naruto closed his eyes and sighed, we plan on capturing him and bringing him back to Konoha. Opening his eyes he looked into Itachi's, unafraid of the genjutsu the man could cast on him. He will in all likelihood be executed for the crimes of betraying his village and joining up with an S-class criminal. Another frown marred the blonde's face, despite all that's happened I still feel some form of friendship, or maybe rivalry is the correct word, for Sasuke. I doubt it will do much good, but I'm hoping to get his sentence to merely life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. Truthfully the part of him that had grown up was warring with the part that still wished to be a chili. One side of him wanted nothing more than to kill Sasuke, to make him answer for the crimes he had committed. Another however, a small part of the child that still clung to Naruto, wanted to somehow save the first person who had acknowledged the blonde in his own way. It was that small part that had not allowed him to kill the youngest Uchiha when he confronted him and Orochimaru all those months ago. I see, Itachi closed his eyes. You have more honor than most shinobi I have met, you may even be more honorable than the fourth. Tell me, what is Sasuke to you? I used to think of him as my brother, Naruto said with a frown. He was the first person to acknowledge me in some way when we were kids, even if it wasn't necessarily good. Later on we gained a tentative friendship and became rivals. The blonde's mind went back to the days he had first started on his path to Genin. I honestly don't know what he is to me anymore. He betrayed my village and my friendship. He broke my trust when he tried to kill me so he could gain the same eyes as you. He left and went to Orochimaru all for the sake of power. A smirk made its way onto the blonde's face. In some ways, I blame you for what he became. Had you never used those damned eyes on him, Sasuke likely would have never turned out like he has now. Do you think you can save him? Asked Itachi. Naruto looked at him quizzically for several moments. There was something in the way Itachi asked that, something that the blonde felt was important, like his answer would decide how this meeting went. When the blonde finally had his answer, he said, I think. Tsunade set the glass of sake she had been drinking on the table before looking at Jiraiya. So the Akatsuki leader is hidden somewhere in Omegakure, huh? She asked. Jiraiya gave her a tight nod. But that country has one of the tightest border patrols around, she said. They check everything, background, purpose of visit, the length you're staying, criminal records. You can't even get into the country without having nearly your entire personal profile on you. Even when they hosted the Chunin exams, they were so isolated it caused all sorts of problems. It doesn't sound like the kind of village that the leader of Akatsuki would be able to move in freely. Maybe, Jiraiya admitted. But since the place has so many restrictions for people coming in and out and their isolationist policies, it's the perfect place to hide any shameful truths. Tsunade looked curious at his statement. Shameful. Jiraiya nodded. It seems that the country has been engulfed in a civil war for quite some time now, and the village has been split in two. There's also been rumors that the leader of Akatsuki is in charge of one of the two factions. Tsunade frowned. That country is surrounded by Tsuchi, Suna, and Hai no Kuni, and it's always been used as a battleground for the wars between these three countries. Because of that, the country never had much political stability, and the number of refugees has only continued to grow. And that's exactly why I'm going to infiltrate the country to verify that information, Jiraiya stated. What? Tsunade's head shot up as she stared at her teammate in shock. It's too dangerous for even someone of your caliber to go there by themselves. Don't forget I'm one of Konoha's Densetsu no Sennin, Suheim, Jiraiya said. You of all people should know what that means. Tsunade looked away from Jiraiya as a sad frown crossed her face. I'm sorry, she whispered, it's because of me that you're always getting put into these kinds of situations. However, her words merely caused Jiraiya to laugh. What's this? Feeling guilty all of a sudden, Suheim. Tsunade smiled. You're the one who was originally supposed to be Hokage. The third always wanted you to succeed him. Meh, there's no way I would want to become Hokage, Jiraiya said dismissively. I'd be no good at the job. I do better when I'm on my own. Is that why you went off by yourself to try and stop Orochimaru from leaving the village? She asked, pouring herself another glass of sake. Jiraiya looked down at the swirling liquid inside of his own cup. Maybe, but I won't have to worry about him anymore. He gave a mirthless chuckle, though that just means I can write the sequel to my novel faster. And yet, reality sometimes seems even stranger than fiction, Tsunade said, holding up the glass of sake to her face and staring at her reflection. Out of all of us, I never thought he would be the first to die. Do you remember when the three of us would go up to that old geezer, the Sandame, and to think that the flat-chested Tsunade would grow such massive boobs and become the next Hokage, Jiraiya said as he decided to interrupt her reminiscing. With a lecherous grin he continued, times sure have changed. You used to be so beautiful and now you're a 50-year-old baba. The blonde Hokage looked like she wanted to beat Jiraiya's face in for that statement, but he continued talking as if he had no idea what she was thinking. You know, it pains me to see how you've stored the memories and thoughts of the people you lost in those large boobs of yours. And those memories are just going to grow. Tsunade stopped talking at that. She knew Jiraiya used terrible analogies and understood what he was saying. Plus she was drunk enough that the desire to hit the pervert for mentioning her breasts was small, for Jiraiya anyways. Oh well, there's no use dwelling on the past, Jiraiya said as he knocked back his drink. Now my role is to set an example for the new generation and do my best to help them in the coming times. He thought of his newest apprentice, the boy that had surpassed all of his expectations. For that, I'll gladly give my life, smiling. That's one of the cool things us old farts can do. If it's possible to save him, then it's worth a try, Naruto said. If I can, I will. But if Sasuke becomes lost to his darkness, then I will save him in the only way possible. I'll kill him. For a long moment the two stared at each other, one with an impassive expression, the other with narrowed blue eyes. After several seconds, which felt like minutes, Itachi gave the blonde a sad smile. I see, then perhaps you can do what I had failed to do, Itachi said at last. What? That was not what Naruto expected to hear. Allow me to reveal some truths that you will need to know if you are to ever bring peace, Itachi intoned as he pointed a finger at Naruto. Tsukiyomi. Akatsuki. Tsunade muttered as she and Jiraiya sat down on a park bench after she finished puking up the alcohol she had drank. For someone to be capable of controlling a group of people that powerful, he must be extremely strong. And you're planning to just waltz right in there like you own the place. Well. Jiraiya sighed, he wasn't really good at these things. I guess I'll be on my way. You know, I always thought I had nothing left in life after Dan and Nawaki died. Tsunade's words caused Jiraiya to pause. They had been everything to me, the last member of my family and someone I had hoped would start a family with me. After they died, I always assumed I was alone. Tsunade. Jiraiya started, but was interrupted by the busty blonde. I ran away from all my problems. I gambled and drank away my entire fortune because I was the only one who could use it anyways. Tsunade placed a hand on her stomach. And I'm long since past the ability to reproduce. In a much softer voice, she asked Jiraiya, have you ever believed yourself to be alone, only to find out that you've essentially ignored the last member of your family for the first 12 years of his life? Are you talking about Naruto? Asked Jiraiya. He knew that Tsunade's mother was an Uzumaki, so she and Naruto were technically related. But they couldn't be anything more than distant cousins at most. Could they? When you had me run that blood check to see if he had any bloodlines, I decided to run a search for other ninja he could be related to in our database, Tsunade said. I found much of what I expected. He's the son of Minato and Kushina, but I. Tsunade. Okay, now Jiraiya was starting to get legitimately concerned. Tsunade looked like she was about to burst. Tears of guilt and shame were welling up in her eyes and looked like they would overwhelm her. I found out that I'm not the last of my line, that I had a hidden family member in Konoha all this time. Tears were now beginning to fall as she gave Jiraiya a helpless look. I found out that Naruto is the grandson of the person I cherished most in the entire world. Jiraiya choked in shock. You don't mean he's. A sob racked Tsunade's body. Yes, Naruto is the grandson of Senju Nawaki, my Odoto. You plan on dying, aren't you? Said Naruto as he stared at the man before him. He could see it in the way Itachi stood, not as the powerful shinobi the blonde knew him to be, but as a man who was walking to his death. You're going to sacrifice yourself to Sasuke. Yes, Itachi said simply, as if he didn't care that he was going to be killed. From what Naruto had seen so far he probably didn't. Are you sure letting Sasuke kill you is the best option? Asked Naruto. I know you love him Itachi, but if what you showed me is true, then your brother has a very good reason to hate Konoha, if he were to ever learn of this. I know, Itachi sighed, I realize the risk I am taking, but I can't kill my brother Naruto. I had chosen him over my village the last time, when I was forced to act against my clan, and I would do so again now. Besides that, I only have a year or two left to live anyways. What do you mean? Asked Naruto, frowning at the older man. I mean I have an illness that has been slowly killing me, said Itachi, getting Naruto's full attention. It has been getting progressively worse, and I don't have much time left in this world. The only thing I can do now is ensure that Sasuke satisfies his desire for revenge. And what if this decision leads to him hating Konoha? Asked Naruto. I get what you're trying to do. You want to wipe away the shame of your clan by letting the past stay buried. You let Sasuke kill you, he gets his revenge, and Konoha gets a hero who killed the slayer of the Uchiha clan. But I don't think you realize that Sasuke is considered a traitor in Konoha now. He betrayed the village all for the sake of power. The blonde shook his head as he looked at the raven-haired man before him. Do you really think that by letting yourself be killed, that the Uchiha clan will be redeemed? Itachi looked at Naruto with that odd half-smile that looked so odd on the mon's normally impassive face. Nothing is certain, Itachi said. I realize that, and I know the chances of Sasuke being welcomed back to Konoha are slim. But I have to do this. If for no other reason than the fact that Sasuke became what he is today because of me. For the sins I committed against him, I have to let him be the one to kill me. The older raven-haired man gave the blonde a determined look. If what you say does come to pass, and Sasuke ends up hating Konoha, then I will be counting on you to do what I could not. Now, I must take my leave. This will likely be the last time we see each other, Naruto-kun. The then burst into a flock of ravens which flew off. Genjutsu, Naruto identified. He frowned for a few seconds as he stared at the spot Itachi had been, his mind whirling with the knowledge he had just learned. However, there wasn't much he could do with the information Itachi had given him at present. Deciding it would be best to move on, the blonde channeled chakra to his feet and jumped back into the trees, determined to get back to the rest of his squad before they knew he was missing. Normally, if Jiraiya had Tsunade laying on top of him, he would have considered himself to have been blessed by Kami. In the many years he had been alive, his crush for the woman had never faded, where others would have moved on after the numerous rejections he had doggedly clung to his crush. Even when he slept with other women at brothels, his mind had always been on the busty blonde. At any other time he would have jumped for joy at the situation he was in. Great, the one thing I want the most has happened and I can't even enjoy it. Jiraiya looked down at the woman who had bodily tackled him to the floor and was currently shedding more tears than he had ever seen in his life. He was actually surprised by the sheer amount of tears coming out of her eyes, having expected her tear ducts to have dried out an hour ago. However, Tsunade seemed to have become a literal waterworks, and nothing he had said thus far managed to make her stop. Eventually, her crying turned to minor sniffles and the blonde woman placed her hands on Jiraiya's chest and pushed herself up. Sorry, she whispered as she got off the white-haired hermit. Are you alright now, Tsunade? He asked, curtailing his lecherous side for the moment. An impressive feat in and of itself. His busty teammate nodded her head and Jiraiya led her back down to the seat they had been sitting on before she had tackled him. Somehow, I feel like I should have known, Tsunade said as she wiped her eyes on her sleeve. Minato had never really acted like Nawaki, but his dream had been the same and his talent as a shinobi. It does make a lot of sense, Jiraiya added, nodding his head. I had always wondered if Minato had come from a shinobi family that simply died out. Part of the reason most civilian children never made it past Chunin was because they lacked the genetics for it. Sure, one could say that it was because ninja clans taught their children at a young age, and a part of that was true. But by and large the main reason was because children from shinobi families had larger, more powerful reserves of chakra due to the fact that their parents, grandparents and so on had all used chakra. That was why ninja like Sasuke had been able to use jutsu like the Gokyaku no Jutsu before he even became a genin. There's also Minato's ability with Jikuken ninjutsu, Jiraiya continued. Out of all the shinobi to ever exist, only Nadaime-sama was as good as he was in that field. Though that doesn't explain why Naruto has a Kekkei Genkei, Tsunade said. Now that her tears had dried and she was no longer as distraught, she found it a little easier to talk about. Minato didn't have a Kekkei Genkei. You mean as far as you know, Jiraiya said, making Tsunade frown at him. Kekkei Genkei, special abilities that are passed down genetically in specific clans. We've always wondered why some people seem to have a specific ability like your grandfather and his Mokuden while others of your clan did not. And yet clans like the Uchiha and Hyuga clans all have their dojutsu. What are you getting at? Asked Tsunade. Your grandfather could combine water and earth to create wood, Jiraiya said. Yet no one else in the Senju clan could do that. However, Nadaime-sama was able to master Suiten manipulation to the point where he could literally create water by absorbing the moisture in the air. I've seen Minato do similar feats with his lightning and wind manipulation, powerful combination attacks that shouldn't have been possible due to the opposing nature of the two elements. Are you saying that the Senju clan may have some odd form of Kekkei Genkei? Asked Tsunade, wondering if what her friend was saying was true. If so, it would actually explain some things. Jiraiya nodded. I've been thinking about it and I believe the Senju clan's ability may be the ability to manipulate chakra in ways others simply can't. Shadaime-sama with his ability to combine wood and water, Nadaime-sama with his master of Suiten jutsu, you with your extreme chakra manipulation, your apprentice still hasn't mastered your strength technique, has she? No, Tsunade said, shaking her head. She's gotten close, but there seems to be something blocking her from using the technique to its full potential. Exactly my point, Jiraiya continued, and then we have Minato. He was actually the first to combine lightning and wind, though he rarely used it on the battlefield due to how destructive it was. It had just as much a chance of killing his allies as it did his enemies. And now we have Naruto, Tsunade said for Jiraiya, who can manipulate and combine water, lightning, and wind to create Arashi Jutsu. It's more of manipulating the very weather itself, Jiraiya said, but he does call it that. As he finished saying that, a serious look crossed the mon's face. I think you should tell him, Tsunade. When the busty blonde looked away, he continued, Naruto deserves to know that he still has a family. But what if I tell him and he hates me for it? Asked Tsunade. You've practically been a member of his family since we brought you back to Konoha, Tsunade, Jiraiya said. Do you really think he would just abandon you if you tell him this? If anything, he'll just let you know that he now has a legitimate reason to call you Ba-chan. Tsunade snorted a bit at that, since she could easily see the blonde Jonin saying just that. Though a part of her was still deathly afraid he wouldn't take it so well, even if she knew that her thoughts on the matter were completely irrational. He has matured, Tsunade admitted with a fond smile. I almost couldn't believe how different he was acting after he got back from his training with you. Ha ha, he really has come a long way, hasn't he? Said Jiraiya with a hearty laugh. The brat managed to exceed all of my expectations. I can't even beat him in our spars anymore without going into Senin mode. He's easily the most powerful apprentice I've ever had, beating out his old man who had always been a once-in-a-generation genius. The last male member of the Sannin gave a rueful chuckle. Naruto has proven to be a once-every-few-centuries genius. I remember when he was just a snot-nosed little genin screaming about becoming Hokage, Tsunade said with a reminiscing smile. He used to be so much like Kushina. Ah yes, that red-headed tomboy, Jiraiya said with a grin. Always roughing it like one of the guys. She was a bit of a firecracker if I remember. They called her Akai Chishio no Habanero due to her fierce attitude and hair color. She grew up to be quite the beauty though, Tsunade said. Oh yeah, did she ever? Jiraiya said with a lecherous grin as his perverted side got the best of him. Jiraiya, the warning tone in Tsunade's voice caused him to stop his train of thought before he got pummeled by the woman's fists, which was not something he wanted to deal with right now. Ahihi, sorry Suheim, the white-haired man coughed several times before getting back on track. You know, as more and more time passed, I really started seeing Naruto has something of a grandson. I've never had any children, but Minato was always like the son I've always wanted, smart, powerful, and a real lady killer. Tsunade gave an indulgent grin. I bet the only reason you like Naruto so much is because he surpassed his old man in his ability to snag beautiful women, she remarked dryly. Isn't that the truth? Jiraiya said with hearty laugh. He's engaged to the Mizukage, the Nibi Jinchuriki, Yugito ni, and. When the man stopped, Tsunade frowned. You know who his other wives are, don't you? She accused. I know one of them, Jiraiya admitted. He won't tell me who the fourth woman he's engaged to is, no matter how I try to wheedle it out of him. But I do know the other woman he is engaged to. He was actually very impressed at how well Naruto and Koyuki managed to keep their relationship a secret. In the world of shinobi and cutthroat politics, keeping a secret like a famous daimyo and actress becoming engaged to a infamous S-ranked ninja was a very difficult thing to do. Why did he tell you and not me? Asked Tsunade, both seething and slightly hurt. It has nothing to do with him telling me, Jiraiya said as he held up his hands in a placating manner. I was just there when they started dating, that's all. Tsunade continued to glare at him, making the white-haired man sigh. Glaring at me isn't going to do anything. I promised Naruto I wouldn't tell anybody, and that includes you. Besides, we're still in a very public location. Even if I were inclined to tell you, I would hear. I suppose I can see your point, Tsunade sighed as she dropped the glare. And I can understand your desire to keep your promise to Naruto. As she looked at her teammate, a wistful smile came to her face. He's so protective of them, even when Mei, who has an entire village of shinobi guarding her. She had been told about the rings they each had, how Naruto had placed the Hiraishin seal on the rings so they could call him whenever they wanted. She suspected it was the reason he would disappear several times a week when not given a mission. He acts a lot like Minato in that regard, Jiraiya said with a chuckle. He looked up at the sky to see the sun beginning to set. Well, I'd better get going. He stood up and grabbed his summoning scroll. Do you really have to do this alone? Asked Tsunade, her voice containing a hint of worry. Couldn't you at least wait for Naruto to return from his mission? I'm sure between the two of you, you could. I have to do this alone, Tsunade, Jiraiya interrupted the woman. I have my own personal reasons for doing this, and they need to be done alone. His words caused the blonde woman to look down. She knew very well why he felt the need to do this by himself. Omegakure was the place where he had met his first 3 apprentices, all of whom had been killed during the Second War after he left. The country was a place of great personal grief for the man. Naturally, anything that happened in that country that concerned him would be personal. That still didn't make it any easier. Don't die, she said. Concern for me, Suheim, Jiraiya joked, don't I feel loved? Tsunade tried to scowl but it ended up failing as she muttered, Baka. I know, why don't we make a bet? Jiraiya said, catching the attention of the busty Hokage. You should bet on me dying. Tsunade looked at him incredulously. With your luck, you'll definitely lose, he gave the shocked-looking woman a grin. And if you lose, you'll have to go on a date with me and let me feel those lush melons of yours. Tsunade's eye began to twitch as Jiraiya gave another of his perverted grins while his hands were making grabbing motions, as if he was just imagining the feel of her breasts in his hands. It seemed that even in the most heartfelt of situations, the man managed to retain his lecherous nature. Poor Jiraiya. Thanks to Naruto's liberal use of Kage Bunshin, creating upwards of 200 clones, the squadron of Konoha ninja were able to quickly and thoroughly search out most of the areas that held Sasuke's scent. It was almost ironic that the blonde Jonin had never used the jutsu in the jutsu as a means to scout, which was what it had been originally made to do. Thanks to his training, Naruto found that even from multiple dispersions his mind was more than capable of processing the knowledge gained. Naruto wasn't the only one using their specialized methods of searching. In the skies above the forest, Sai made his own search, riding on an ink eagle of his own creation. He searched the area from above to see if he couldn't pick up any sign of the Sasuke or the group said ninja had formed. It was nearing the 1-hour mark when Naruto stiffened at the feeling of one of his Kage Bunshin being killed, pierced through the stomach by a Chidori. I found Sasuke, he shouted as the wind rushed past his face. The others all looked over at him as he stopped, follow me. He spun on his heels and began jumping in a different direction. The others soon followed the blonde as he sped off. Naruto-kun. Hinata called as the blonde began getting farther and farther away. Hold on. There's someone else up ahead. Just as Hinata said this, a man wearing an orange mask, with the standard black cloak with red clouds on it, stood up and waved. Hola! He greeted the group with an enthusiastic and childlike voice. Naruto's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before his instincts kicked in. He flipped his body around, his feet hit the branch as he moved in a crouch, his hand just barely brushing against the bark near the mon's feet before he used the branch as a springboard to jump back down to the ground. It's him, the blonde thought to himself, wondering why this man was out here. Oh my, the man shouted, hello, there, and there. I never imagined I would meet up with Konoha shinobi all the way out here. And there's 2, 4, 6. It's 8 against 1, now that's just unfair. Oh, don't worry about that, Naruto said with a chuckle. I'm not the kind of guy who plays unfairly. This battle will be between just you and me. The one eye of Kakashi, along with the 2 of every other ninja that had been sent on this mission widened. Naruto. Kakashi started to say, but was cut off by the blonde. This guy may be acting like a fool, but don't let his appearance deceive you, Kakashi, Naruto said. All members of Akatsuki are S-ranked ninja, none of you would stand a chance and I'm going to need room in order to fight at full strength. Before Kakashi or anyone else could protest, the blonde Jonin tossed the copy ninja a set of scrolls. When you get to Sasuke, use those scrolls to seal him and Itachi, I designed those specifically for prisoner transportation. The silver-haired Jonin looked like he wanted to debate with the blonde, but seeing the look in Naruto's eyes decided not to. Got it, he told his current superior. Hold on a minute, argued Kiba, do you just expect us to run off while you fight? I expect you to do the mission we've been assigned, Naruto said evenly. Our mission is not to fight Akatsuki right now, but to apprehend Sasuke and bring him back to Konoha. The blonde looked at the masked Akatsuki member, if he's here then it's only because he wants to delay us in getting to Sasuke. Yeah but, Kiba. Naruto cut off the dog using genin harshly, making everyone flinch at the cut-through steel voice. This is not up for debate. Our mission is to retrieve Sasuke. We can only do that if one of us stays behind to make sure this guy doesn't follow us, and of the 8 of us I'm the only one capable of fighting an S-rank ninja on even grounds. Seeing the defiance still on his friend's face, the blonde sighed. Look, I'm trusting you to complete this mission. In return, I want you to trust that I know what I'm doing. Despite looking like he had swallowed something foul, Kiba nodded. Fine, he huffed, but I expect you to catch up when you're done. Naruto gave a mirthless chuckle. Don't worry, I'll be along shortly. Knowing a dismissal when he heard one, Kakashi began to give out orders. Let's go, he said before jumping off and away from the battle that was about to take place. The others minus Naruto soon followed the silver-haired Jonin and made their way out of the battlefield. Before they could get far, the masked ninja appeared right in front of them, popping up from the ground and shouting, Ninpo, Mogura Tataki no Jutsu, ninja art, Whack-a-mole Jutsu. You guys cannot escape me when I'm using my super awesome. Ah! The orange-masked mon's speech was cut off as Naruto appeared in front of him in a yellow flash. Rasengan. Naruto smashed his technique into the man, or at least, he tried to. The Rasengan ended up going right through the mask Akatsuki member like he wasn't even there. Keep going, the blonde shouted at the Konoha ninja, who had stopped when the man appeared in front of them. Don't stop for anything. I'll make sure he doesn't get you, just get moving. The others soon did as told and began to move out. Like the first time they tried, the man in the orange mask popped up in front of them. That could have hurt if it high, and once again he was cut off as Naruto reappeared in front of him in another flash. However, unlike last time, the team of Konoha ninja didn't stop as they continued jumping away. The man tried to follow using his Mogura Tataki no Jutsu, but the blonde Jonin was having none of that as he flashed to the mon's location each time he tried to cut off his allies. You really fast, the masked ninja said as he stopped. Super fast, I don't think I've ever met someone as fast as you are. Cut the act, Naruto said, his voice colder than a glacier from the former Yuki no Kuni. You're not fooling me with that act of stupidity, Tobi, or should I say, Uchiha Madara. The moment the name left Naruto's mouth, the masked ninja's entire countenance changed. His posture straightened, the laid-back and slightly goofy aura dissipated, and the man's entire body radiated a confidence bordering on arrogant and power beyond that of any other shinobi Naruto had faced to date. So, the man said, his voice no longer that of an overexcited idiot, but of a man who had no trouble killing others in order to achieve his goals. You know who I am. I'm curious as to how you know that. Naruto smirked as 2 tri-pronged kunai slipped into his hands and he slid into the stance his father often used in conjunction with his kunai. Do you really think I'm going to tell you that? Chapter 20. When it rains, it pours within the large body of water that surrounded Imegakure no Sato. A small toad stuck its head out of the water. This was not so strange. Amphibians of all kinds were often found near or around the water, and considering how much precipitation Imegakure received, there were far more toads there than there would be anywhere else. However, while there didn't seem to be anything remarkable about this toad, what it did next would easily be something that stepped out of the bounds of reality. Where if anyone that was not a shinobi had been watching, they undoubtedly would not believe what they were seeing. The toad opened its mouth, almost as if to croak. Before the creature could even make a noise, however, a large hand, followed by an arm, came out. This was soon followed by a head full of white hair, another arm, a body wearing a red and green kabuki outfit, and a set of legs. When the man's body was all of the way out, Jiraiya of the Sennin stood up. Imegakure, the man muttered, an unusually somber expression on the man's face. I never wanted to come back here. Imegakure was a small, yet highly industrialized hidden village located in an unnamed country. Its architecture was composed of several metallic skyscrapers with road ducts connected to them and mazy power lines surmounting. A number of smaller villages also surrounded Imegakure. As its name suggested, it rained almost constantly due to a storm above the village. It was a place that held many bad memories for Jiraiya, memories of several of his many failures, of his loss against Hanzo, the deaths of his 3 students. There was a lot about the village that would haunt the Sennin until he died. Straightening his back, Jiraiya, the Gamma Sennin of Konoha and one of the most powerful men in the world, began making his way into the sprawling village. Pain's head snapped up as he looked out at the falling rain. His eyes narrowed. Pain, asked Conan, seeing the look on his face. Someone has managed to infiltrate Omegakure, Pain said. Conan had to fight hard not to let her eyes widen or her emotions show on her face. She didn't think it was Naruto. He had already infiltrated AIM, and they could see each other via Hiraishin Ch. But that didn't mean she didn't worry. Pain continued on, unmindful of her feelings. Judging by their chakra and the fact that I didn't feel them until they entered suggests they are skilled. Jiraiya unsealed a plain tan traveler's cloak from a seal hidden in his vest pocket. Putting it on, he threw the hood up and walked out from under the small overhang he had used to stay out of the rain. As he wondered where the best place to start gathering information would be, he came upon a little shop with an old lady selling pork buns outside. He grabbed one of the buns off the stove the old lady had them on. He quickly began tossing the hot bun from one hand to the other in surprise. Though he supposed it shouldn't be, it had been on a stove after all. It was supposed to be hot. When it finally cooled down enough so that he could hold it in one hand, he reached into a pocket with the other and pulled out some money. Ba-chan, I'll take one of these, he said to the old lady, holding the money out to her. Anytime, the old lady said as she took the money. As her hand closed around the ryo, she eyed him warily. You know, I haven't seen you around here before. You're not from around here, are you? That obvious, huh? Said Jiraiya with a jovial smile and a laugh. Well, I'm actually a writer, you see. I do a lot of traveling for a magazine I write in about regional specialties. Jiraiya gave himself a mental pat on the back at picking this particular persona to adopt when he saw the woman's suspicion melt away in a smile to take her face. As a spy master, he had to always come up with false jobs and such in order to keep suspicion off his back. It helped that he was at least partly telling the truth, he was a writer after all. He took a bite of the food while the old woman spoke. Oh, I see. So, what do you think of my pork buns? They're excellent, Jiraiya commented honestly. They were good. Just like the rumors say, these pork buns are quite amazing. The old woman smiled and nodded. Right. I would love to introduce these into our magazine, Jiraiya continued. He looked at the woman and smiled, slightly sheepishly. If that's okay with you, that is. The old woman suddenly gained a flustered look. Really? You want to place my food in a magazine? Of course, Jiraiya said. He bent down and cupped his hand to his mouth so he could whisper in a conspiratorial fashion. And once I write about them, you'll be flooded by customers. Everyone will want one of your pork buns. Really now? The woman looked rather excited by the idea of having so many customers. You would be able to do that. Of course, Jiraiya said. He looked around at the surrounding area. He couldn't see very far due to the rain and the large buildings blocking the other parts of the city out. It sure is peaceful here. Yes, it is, the woman agreed. This village is no longer suffering, all thanks to Pain-sama. The old woman put her hands in a prayer sign, all praise him. Pain. Jiraiya muttered with a frown. It was disturbing to see the signs of utter devotion on this woman's face as she spoke of Pain. She looked as if she was speaking of Kami himself. Yes, Pain-sama, the woman said with a smile. Jiraiya's frown increased. What happened to Hanzo no Salamander? His voice trailed off when he noticed the looks he was getting from the citizens around him. They all held expressions of scorn and suspicion. While attracting attention at all was bad while infiltrating a village, the last thing he wanted was for people to actually be suspicious of him. Sorry to bother you, Ba-chan, he said lightly as he placed his hood over his head again and walked off. I see, Madara replied. Unlike Naruto, he didn't bother changing stances, opting to stand with a casual demeanor that let the blonde know that the ancient Uchiha didn't see him as much of a threat. Well, Naruto would just have to change that. Flicking his wrist, Naruto let the tri-pronged kunai sail from his grasp. He flashed to it almost immediately after, his throw having been so hard and so fast it only took a second to reach Madara's position. A spinning blue ball of chakra appeared in the blonde's hand, which he rammed into Madara's chest. However, the powerful Rasengan didn't even touch the former Uchiha leader. Instead, it went right through the man as if he wasn't even there. Naruto frowned as he dodged the sickle and chains that Madara had summoned, most likely through a seal somewhere on his person. He threw his kunai again, flashing several feet away before tossing both kunai, one near Madara and the other into a tree. The blonde flashed to the one near Madara and attempted to attack him, this time using wind blade in an effort to cut the man's head off. Once again his jutsu went right through Madara and he was forced to flash to his second kunai as the man attacked him in return. It has to be some kind of Jikuken jutsu, Naruto concluded as he analyzed the phasing ability of his opponent. He could be sending his body to a separate yet connected dimension, thereby making attacks phase through him. The question was whether he was phasing his whole body or just parts of his body, and what kind of limitations such a jutsu contained. He couldn't imagine that this ability didn't have some kind of cost, or perhaps a limit on the number of phases he could do in a certain amount of time. Perhaps it was time to put Madara's abilities to the test. Naruto jumped into the air, using chakra to boost his height. At the apex of his jump he flicked his wrists, launching the two kunai from his grasp. Those kunai soon multiplied into dozens. Hundreds. All of them heading down for the forest floor below. They covered the ground, the branches, every single area was littered with tri-pronged kunai, spaced apart by 15 feet to grant Naruto maximum usage. No matter where Madara tried to go he would not be able to get to the edge of his kunai field in time should his abilities run dry. Smirking, Naruto disappeared in a yellow flash. Soon enough flashes began to appear all around Madara, they were constantly in motion, flashing from all sides in an attempt to hit him. The attacks moved so fast that the Uchiha found he couldn't even tell which flash was Naruto and which was simply an afterimage. They came in all at once, at the same exact instant, making distinguishing between flashes impossible. Not even the famed Sharingan was of any help here. However his phasing ability wasn't all Madara had. While Naruto was flashing around him the man disappeared within a vortex, reappearing several meters away. The blonde shinobi was quick to flash to the man, not wanting to let up and possibly give the man an advantage. He hadn't realized that in keeping up the pressure his advantage had been lost. Though he figured that out when he tried to continue flashing around Madara and got a foot in the face for his efforts. The blonde flipped around, landing on an adjacent branch and using chakra to stick his feet to the bark. Your Sharingan can see my chakra signature when using the Hiraishin, Naruto stated with narrowed eyes. He could almost feel the smirk the man was likely carrying on his face. Correct. I might not be able to discern which is the real you when you're flashing around me like previously. But dealing with a single Hiraishin attack is easy, if you know how to do it. Naruto grit his teeth, not liking the smug tone in the man's voice. Well then, I guess I'll just have to step up my game. We both know there is no stepping up, Madara said mockingly. You've been fighting me as hard as you can since the beginning. You and I both know anything less than your best effort will end in your defeat. The blonde frowned at the way the ancient Uchiha called his bluff, but didn't comment further. Flinging the two kunai into his grip Naruto once again disappeared in a yellow flash. Jiraiya smiled as the beautiful young waitress placed some dango and red bean paste on his table. Here you go, she said cheerfully as the white-haired hermit wondered if he could convince her to help him come up with material for his books. He grinned at her and was about to go with old try and true, up front and ask them, routine. Tried because he had tried to use it many times, and true because it never failed to leave him with a rather large handprint on his face, or worse. However, a small hanging ornament caught his attention. He could tell rather easily that it was made from paper, the origami ornament was done up in a white angel. Excuse me miss, but what's that? He asked, pointing to the ornament. The waitress looked at him curiously for a moment, then turned around to see where he was pointing. A smile came to her face. Ah, that's our angel, she said, and once again Jiraiya noted the same tone of devotion from this woman as the old lady. Don't you know? There's a rumor that says if you place an origami of her in front of your shop, you'll have good fortune. Good fortune, huh? Jiraiya mused out loud. As he began to eat he couldn't help but wonder what was going on. This country was nothing like what he had expected. He had been expecting a country torn in two with civil strife, if not outright war. And yet Megakure was completely unified. How could this be? It looks like I'm going to need to do some more searching, he decided with a sigh. Maybe I should interrogate one of their shin. Oh, bye. His thoughts were derailed as he saw a rather garish pink sign for a brothel that read Cum Cum Pub War. Above the name were two hearts being pierced with an arrow. Jiraiya's eyes widened and his hands came up and made grasping motions, already imagining the beautiful, nubile flesh they would be feeling. Maybe I should interrogate them for some information instead. Oh, Jiraiya-kun, you must be joking, laughed the blonde woman wearing a rather revealing kimono. She poured some sake from the bottle she was holding into the white-haired hermit's cup. Did that really happen? I assure you every word I said is true, Jiraiya confirmed, right before he took a long gulp from his glass. His cheeks were currently flushed red from all of the alcohol he had been drinking, and he was feeling a nice buzz. Wow. That must have been a fierce battle, she said in an impressed voice. It was hard to tell whether she was really impressed, or if she even believed him. Call girls like her were trained to please the men they served, which included feeding a man's ego. Not that Jiraiya particularly cared if she was being honest in her admiration or not. Not as fierce as this battle, Tezuna-chan, Jiraiya said as he rather blatantly stared at her chest, which was almost Tsunade-sized. You know, your name is very similar to another girl I know. She was a lot like you, an amazing and beautiful woman. Seeing you makes the long trip I had to make to get here all worthwhile. Oh, so you're not from around here? Asked Tezuna. No, I had come here seeking work, Jiraiya said. I heard there might be some decent paying work for a mercenary like myself. I believe the person hiring was called Salamander no Hanzo, shish. Tezuna hissed as she placed a finger to her lips. You shouldn't talk about someone like Hanzo here. Why not? Asked Jiraiya, looking rather confused. Tezuna looked around to make sure no one was within hearing range, before leaning towards Jiraiya to whisper in his ear. If people here think you're a comrade of Hanzo, they'll kill you. Really? That sounds rather dangerous. Jiraiya exclaimed. The new leader, Pain-sama, is very strict, Tezuna said. If anyone gives him a reason to be suspicious of them he will kill them without mercy. At least, that's what my hubby said. What? Exclaimed Jiraiya. You have a husband, Tezuna-chan. Yes, but he's just a village genin so we don't make much income, so I have to work to, she explained. Ouch, sounds like you have your work cut out for you, the white-haired man said. However on the inside he was frowning in thought. This pain was obviously very powerful if he could invoke such reactions from the people in his village. That no one even seemed to know who the man was also a cause for concern. From what he had gathered no one had even seen Pain in the village, and his, Angel, was the people's only connection to the enigmatic leader of Omegakure. For someone of Jiraiya's caliber, finding such little information on a person was disturbing to say the least. Jiraiya focused his attention on Tezuna some more, asking some general questions about her before asking about Pain. According to my hubby, the rain is falling because of Pain-sama's technique, she told him. With that technique he is able to see what everyone in the village is doing. That kick-started the man's brain. That sounds like a pretty powerful technique, Jiraiya said. It's kind of disturbing that someone could invade another's privacy so thoroughly. Tezuna nodded. That's why it's best to mind our tongues. Tezuna-chan. Tezuna looked up to see one of the workers calling for her. She stood up and bowed to Jiraiya. Forgive me, Jiraiya-kun. I'll be right back. As she walked off the flush from the alcohol Jiraiya had consumed disappeared as did his act. His eyes narrowed in thought. If this, Pain really has a technique like that, then he already knows I'm here. It's likely he's been watching me from the beginning. That was a disturbing thought. He had believed he had infiltrated the village successfully, but if the man could actually watch him somehow using the rain then he had been caught the moment it touched him. Naruto grit his teeth as he used the Hiraishin to dodge another of Madara's Kamuis. He and the ancient Uchiha had been fighting for nearly half an hour now, and neither had really landed a hit on the other. Naruto had suffered several nicks and cuts that had already healed over thanks to Kyuubi, and Madara's Akatsuki cloak was cut in several places, but that was the extent to the damage either of them had received. In the shinobi world combat was fast-paced and brutal. Every second counted because a single second where you're not on your game is a second in which someone can slip a kunai between your eyes. Most shinobi battles don't last more than 15 minutes, and the longer battles are normally the ones done between genin who don't know more than the basic academy jutsu and have maybe one or two tricks up their sleeve. As ninja progress in rank and ability the amount of time those battles take lessen. Most battles between Jonin level ninja don't take more than 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most, if the two trapped in combat are of equal or similar strength. That was why the battle going on between the two currently in the clearing was so unusual. The battle currently happening between Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto and Uchiha Madara was not only remarkable in just how long they had been fighting, but in the speed with which they fought. The Hiraishin, probably the most famous Jikuken jutsu to ever grace the elemental nations, a jutsu that was made famous for the decimation of somewhere around 1,000 Iwa ninja during the Third Great Shinobi War. A jutsu that Naruto used to replicate that feat during the time he spent in Kiri, helping his fiancée Terumi Mei, the now Godai Mizukage and Kurigakure's civil war. And the space-time abilities of Uchiha Madara, a man whose skill was legendary, and whose prowess in war and the art of combat was unparalleled, a man who was said to only have one equal in Senju Hashirama, the founder of Konohagakure no Sato and leader of the Senju clan. It was a battle where the speed being used by the two was so great that no one else would have been capable of keeping up with it, save maybe the Yondaime Reikage, a battle in which every millisecond could mean the difference between life and death. There was no room for mistakes in combat on this level, and both Naruto and Madara knew that. Futon. Kami Oroshi, wind style. Divine wind from the mountain. Naruto gathered a vast amount of wind chakra into his hands and unleashed it in a powerful vortex that flew towards Madara at insanely high speeds. They would have struck had Madara not gone underground and used his whack-a-mole jutsu to appear on a tree several meters away. You'll have to do better than that, young Namikaze, Madara taunted. Don't act so superior, Madara, Naruto said with a frown. I may not have hit you, but you haven't done much damage to me either. True, I suppose we're in a bit of stalemate then, chuckled Madara. Not for long. Naruto growled as he began gathering lightning chakra into his left and water chakra into his right. Ranton. Sutoryu no Tama, storm release. Storm Dragon Bullet. The blonde shinobi thrust out his hand and launched a condensed ball of water that had electricity crackling inside it. The ball began to morph as it moved, the lightning moving to the front as it took the shape of a dragon head. The crackle of the lightning made the dragon bullet sound like it was roaring at Madara as it crashed into the man. Or at least it seemed to crash into him. Oh my. What a powerful attack, Madara said. Truly, you are a powerful shinobi. Don't patronize me, Madara, Naruto said with narrowed eyes. Oh but it's so fun. Madara chuckled. That's quite a scary look, Naruto-kun. You really should be more careful with who you glare at. Naruto's lips thinned into a small line. He despised how this man was mocking him even as they battled. It was like Madara didn't even deem him a threat. Using the Hiraishin, Naruto appeared less than 2 feet from Madara, 2 fingers extended outwards and pointing at the Uchiha. Raiden. Gion, a lance of white lightning shot from Naruto's fingertips and pierced through Madara's body. Before the lightning attack even hit however, the blonde shinobi had already flashed to another seal behind the ancient Uchiha. Ranton. Senku Shikyo, storm release. Lightning death, a white beam with the same diameter of Naruto's finger shot towards Madara, piercing him through the head. Once more Naruto was gone in a flash and reappeared right in front of the Sharingan-wielding ninja. Futon. Shinko Renpa, wind release. Serial waves. Naruto took a deep breath and then exhaled an untold number of wind blades. He moved his head up and down, sending a stream of unending blades through Madara's body just as the 2 other attacks hit. None of them even touched Madara. My, what powerful ninjutsu you have, the Uchiha complimented, though the mocking tone it was in let Naruto know what the red-eyed man really thought. Had I been anyone else I dare say those attacks would hurt. Damn it. Naruto thought as he flashed away. Nothing I do even seems capable of hitting him. What the hell kind of jutsu is he using to avoid my attacks? Even as skilled as the blonde was in Jikuken jutsu he could think of nothing that allowed attacks to simply phase through them. It was like the man was a ghost. Well, seeing as how you're done, I believe it's my turn now. Naruto's eye widened as Madara appeared right in front of him, and he was just barely able to dodge kunai that came his way. He attempted to grab the Uchiha by the hand and pull him into a kick. However, all that happened was his hand phased through Madara's wrist and he was sent flying backwards with a kick. Flipping around, Naruto landed on a branch and glared at Madara. He's pretty fast even without manipulating space and time. I need to be ready. Naruto watched as Madara appeared right in front of him again. While the man seemed to have gained quite a bit of speed, it was nothing the blonde couldn't handle and had only surprised him because he had not been expecting it. Naruto flashed behind Madara and launched a wind blade through the man's body. It phased through as always, but the blonde refused to let that bother him. He flashed again and sent a beam of Rantan chakra at Madara, a much larger beam than the small one he had fired last time. This one was around 10 feet in diameter, and when it struck the place Madara had been standing, the entire area disintegrated. The beam flew through the tree, literally vaporizing the trunk. With that part of the trunk gone, the top of the tree had nothing holding it up, and it soon fell down to the floor below with a loud crash. Oh my. Now that was scary. Nothing I do seems capable of affecting him, Naruto thought with narrowed eyes. Without understanding his jutsu, I can't figure out what weaknesses it has. Damn. Naruto wasn't quite sure what to do in this situation. While he had been in some tough battles, no one had ever pushed him this far, and no one had ever had a technique he couldn't break down and analyze. It was frustrating and made even worse by the fact that the man he was fighting didn't seem to be taking this battle seriously. Maybe I should go for something with a more area-wide effect. The battle soon began to take a step in a new direction as Naruto began using a combination of Hiraishin and powerful ninjutsu to keep Madara from doing much more than letting the attacks phase through him. It was the only weakness he had really discerned. Madara could only move so much when using his phase ability. Naruto didn't know why, but he wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. While the battle was going on, the blonde ninja began releasing more and more of his chakra into the atmosphere. An act which did not go unnoticed by Madara. What's this? The ancient Uchiha wondered as he watched the boy saturate the surrounding area with his chakra. What is he up to? Almost done, Naruto said to himself. Overhead the sky began to darken, rain started pouring down and lightning could be heard within the storm clouds that had suddenly formed overhead. Naruto's eyes began to take on a fierce blue glow, lightning crackled inside of them as he began gathering more and more chakra. You should have taken me more seriously, Madara, Naruto said in a tone that quite literally oozed with power. It was as if the chakra he had gathered was so massive it affected his tone of voice and speech. Now you're going to regret it. Madara watched curiously as Naruto jumped into the air, and stayed there. What? A shocked Madara thought as the blonde shinobi continued floating in the air, his hands raised over his head as if attempting to make an appeal to Kami. There was a pulse of chakra, so thick and powerful it was visible even without the Sharingan. It spread out across the area, pushing out exactly 2 kilometers before stopping and creating a light blue dome that encompassed the area ground below and the storm clouds above Naruto. Great hailstones ranging from the size of pebbles to that of large boulders began crashing into the clearing. Dozens of trees were hit with these mammoth-sized stones, which tore through them like a scythe tore through wheat. The wind began to pick up, growing into a fierce hurricane-like storm in less than a second. Trees were whipped every which way as the wind lashed out at them. Cuts began appearing on the bark as the wind began taking on a sharp quality. Then, as if the gods themselves had decided to try and smite Madara, 4 large tornadoes came crashing down into the clearing. They tore up the land, gouging out deep craters of earth and stone, which was then funneled into the tornadoes and swirled around them in motion with the wind. The attack, which many would only believe was an act of nature, was awe-inspiring in its power and fury. Then the lightning came down. It crashed into the clearing, tearing the world asunder and sending a massive shock wave through the earth. Where the lightning struck, sparks would cascade across the land in all directions, consuming and destroying everything in their path. With a scream that seemed to shake the very heavens themselves, Naruto let out the rest of the chakra he had been gathering. The entire world became blinded in a flash of white light. Pain stood on the open balcony, letting the rain hit him as it fell. His eyes roamed over the village. Konan, when I stop the downpour, I want you to use your ability to stop the intruder. Konan did her best to still her fast-beating heart and nodded. Leave it to me. Pain ran through several hand seals and began releasing his chakra. It's done. Right. Jiraiya almost smiled as he saw the genin he was waiting for walk into the bar he had built using a transformation toad. When Tezuna had left, he had taken the opportunity to follow her and discovered her husband was coming back from a mission of some kind. Since he had not had any luck in getting the kind of information he had wanted from civilians, he decided the best way was to get information from a Megacure's shinobi. He had given himself a basic disguise. He now had short black hair, along with a goatee and sunglasses. Have such an elaborate disguise might be an unnecessary precaution, but he couldn't be sure that Pain didn't know what he looked like and sent that information to the shinobi under his command. He wasn't going to take any chances now that he knew how dangerous the man was. Welcome, he said as the genin and his partner hung up their raincoats and sat down. What can I get for you two? Get us some snacks and some sake, the genin with light brown hair said. It's not Sunday, is it? Isn't that when Pain-sama normally uses this jutsu? Pain-sama must have had something important come up, the other genin, one with dark brown shoulder-length hair said. Maybe he's leaving the country for something. But it's never rained this much on other days of the week, said the man that Jiraiya had decided to call Spiky. The other genin, who had just been dubbed Scraggly by Jiraiya, shrugged. Maybe he needs to put a lot of power into this jutsu so it lasts. But if it keeps up like this. Oi! Watch your mouth, the scraggly genin said angrily. Pain-sama is working constantly for everyone in the village. Just bear with it for a while. Yeah, I guess you're right, the spiky-haired genin replied. He then looked over at the disguised Jiraiya and frowned. Why haven't you made us anything yet? Sorry, it just takes some time to prepare, Jiraiya said. You see, this is our grand opening today, so I've got a special, grand opening, service today. Really? Exclaimed an excited Scraggly. What kind of service is it? The Club Frog's special torture service. At these words a puff of smoke enveloped Jiraiya and he was returned to his normal spiky white-haired form. The two genin quickly leapt to their feet, but before they could do anything the pair was engulfed in a large cloud of smoke. Screams soon echoed from inside the bar, which began to morph and shrink until it turned into a small toad. The toad quickly hopped into the surrounding lake where no one would be able to find it as Jiraiya began to interrogate the two genin. The attack done by Naruto had not gone unnoticed. The entire team that Tsunade had put together had all stopped to look at what could only be a contained version of Armageddon. What the hell is that? Shouted Kiba. I don't know, Hinata mumbled with wide eyes. I can't use my Byakugan on that, there's so much chakra I'd go blind if I did. My Kikochu tell me that's all Naruto's chakra creating that attack, Shino said. Truly attack did not do the massive done of well-contained annihilation justice, but there wasn't anything else the Aburame could think of to call it. You're telling me that's all Naruto? Kiba shouted. The look of dumb wonderment on his face would have been priceless and something Shino would have used for nice blackmail material, had the situation not been so unbelievable. That is exactly what I am saying, Kiba-san, Shino replied in the same monotone voice he always used. No more words were spoken as everyone watched in a mixture of shock and awe at the dome, which had now become a pure white that no one could see through. A few seconds later the dome had cleared, allowing them to see what had come its in wake. There's nothing there anymore, Sakura stuttered with wide eyes. Everything that was within that done is just gone. Hinata, can you see anything? Asked Kakashi. Hinata tried activating her Byakugan, only to gasp in pain and turn them off a second later. No, there is still far too much chakra saturating the area. She blinked several times as if trying to get rid of spots that appeared before her eyes. Kakashi sighed. Let's not stay here. Whatever Naruto did, he did it to give us enough time to capture Sasuke without interference. Let's go. Naruto floated back down to the ground. As soon as his feet touched the now decimated ground he was forced to a knee as he gasped for breath. His entire body felt like it was on fire. His muscles were twitching spastically and every millimeter of movement sent jolts of unrelenting pain through his body. Even with his impressive pain tolerance, all he wanted to do was bitch and moan about how much pain he was in. Fuck. I didn't think it would hurt this much. Naruto hacked up several globs of blood. He grimaced when he noticed the blood was charred black. Well, damn. Kyuubi, damage assessment. There was a large sigh from the great beast in his mind. You have fried most of your nervous system, your veins have been charred beyond belief, and your muscles all look like they've been placed in a deep fryer. A chuckle escaped the creature's throat. You should be good in a few hours. I have to admit, that was a rather impressive attack, brat. Almost reminds me of my own force of nature abilities. Gee, I feel so happy that I'm being compared to a furball with a chip on his shoulder, Naruto said in a sarcastic tone. He chuckled when he heard a grumble of, impudent whelp, in his mind. The blonde felt Kyuubi's chakra begin flooding his body and sighed in relief. While the Biju's chakra may be poisonous to anyone else, to him it was the ultimate painkiller. He could feel all of his damaged internal organs being mended together and knew it wouldn't be long before he could move again. A flash of instinct, a warning of imminent danger was all that saved him from being impaled by a sickle. Not to say that Naruto got away unscathed. He had only managed to roll to his feet and turn around before being impaled through the shoulder. Naruto grunted and bit his tongue hard enough to taste blood as he found himself staring at Uchiha Madara. That attack was quite deadly, the Uchiha said, and for once his voice was entirely serious. And with good reason, as the man's left arm was gone entirely, his mask was cracked and half of it had fallen off, revealing the left side of his age-lined face. He was also missing his right leg below his knee and his remaining hand only had 3 fingers. Had I been any slower that would have killed me. How are you still alive? Shouted Naruto as his frustration boiled over. That was my strongest attack. There's no way you could have survived that. Au contraire, my dear fox. I am quite resourceful. Surviving that attack was hard but not impossible for one such as me. Naruto snarled as he grabbed the sickle and sent as much lightning chakra as he was able. Due to the damage he had sustained, he ended up getting hurt too, but it completed its objective of getting Madara to let go of the weapon and jump away. Though how he was able to move so nimbly when he only had one leg was beyond the blonde. Naruto grunted as he pulled it out and threw it away. He stared at Madara as he prepared for another round. If he were honest with himself, the blonde knew he would not last for much longer. Not unless he got at least an hour or 2 of rest so he could recover from the damage he had done to himself. Not that he was going to be giving up anytime soon. It seems we are at a stalemate, Madara replied. Maybe. Naruto stopped mid-sentence before smirking. Actually, Madara, it seems I'm going to need to reschedule our little playmate for another day. I've got to go. You know how it is, places to go, people to see. But don't worry, I'm sure we'll meet each other again real soon. With that, Naruto disappeared in a yellow flash, leaving behind a frustrated Madara who finally let loose a scream of pain from the loss of his limbs. Report. Naruto ordered as soon as he appeared next to Kakashi in a bright flash of yellow. He didn't let anyone see just how much it hurt to even speak. We have Sasuke, Kakashi said, holding up the prisoner transportation scroll. As well as the corpse of Itachi. Sasuke won. Naruto already knew Sasuke would win. Itachi had not gone to meet his younger brother to kill him, but to sacrifice himself to him. But he had to keep up appearances. For now. Yes, when we got there Itachi was dead and Sasuke was unconscious, Kakashi said with a nod. It looked like they had both been through one hell of a battle. The one-eyed man then looked the blonde up and down. Though I don't think either of them were as beat up as you. Naruto would have chuckled had doing so not hurt so much. Yeah, well, that Toby character was harder than I thought. I'm sure, that must be why you destroyed 2 kilometers of forest, Kakashi said with an eye smile. It was, Naruto replied, he didn't have the strength to rise to Kakashi's bait right now. It looks like our mission is complete, so let's head to Konoha. Hi. Outside the rain in Imegakure had stopped. Pain turned to Konan. Do it, Konan. Hi, she said, bringing her hands into a single hand seal. Cracks soon appeared on her face and the sound of peeling was heard. Konan spread her arms wide as her body began to peel apart into some sheets of paper. Hundreds of thousands of sheets floated into the air as Konan's body disappeared and became paper. The small purple flower that she had kept in her hair since she was little was the last sheet to float off and flatten itself. Then the sheets began to fold themselves until thousands of butterflies now floated in the air. The small origami butterflies flapped their wings and began to disperse, heading off to search for the intruder. Konan did not know who it was, but she could only hope it wasn't someone allied with Naruto. Jiraiya frowned as he walked down one of the many streets in AIM, thinking about what he had learned from interrogating the low-level genin. It seemed no one really knew much if anything about Pain. All they had was rumors and hearsay. No one even knew what he looked like, and some thought rumor of Pain's existence is just a myth. Everything the people heard, whether they were orders, speeches and even religious festivals were all given to the populace by proxies or the angel. Because this, Jiraiya couldn't even tell if Pain existed, or whether he was simply a front for the true person acting behind the scenes. Maybe this angel was the person who was really in charge, or even someone who didn't truly live in Imegakure. Unfortunately, all he had to go on was what he knew, and that wasn't much. Even more disturbing was that he had heard the civil war that had supposedly been going on had been over for over a decade. Even worse was the rumor that Pain had crushed a Megakure all by himself, including Salamander no Hanzo, a man who was said to be just as and maybe even more powerful than Sarutobi Hiruzen had been in his prime. That was another thing Jiraiya had trouble grasping. Hanzo was a legend for his prowess on the battlefield. He had even been the one to defeat Jiraiya, Orochimaru and Tsunade and had given them the title of Sannin. Even more concerning was the knowledge that Hanzo had become extremely paranoid during the later years after the war. From what the genin had said, Hanzo had always been surrounded by an elite unit of guards to protect him at all times, and even children were searched for weapons when he went out. That anyone could defeat not only Omegakure's forces, but Hanzo all by themselves was a frightening prospect. However, that wasn't even the worst thing he had learned about Pain. No, the worst was the man was not only powerful, but completely merciless as well. He had killed not just Hanzo, but Hanzo's parents, his wife, his child, distant relatives, anyone even remotely related to or allied with Hanzo was killed. Then he had burnt their homes, several living districts which to this day were still demolished as a warning to those who might show resistance. Jiraiya knew now that the only way to get anywhere was to find this Pain and fight them himself. As he entered a new road, his eyes widened as he saw several hundred sheets of paper flying at him. Despite being surprised, however, he wasn't an S-ranked ninja for nothing and reacted so quickly that no one would have known otherwise. His hands went through several seals in less than a second and blew out a large fire bullet. Kaiten. Enden. Konan was forced to move back as the fire bullet flew towards her. She reached the end of the road and backed up against the wall as the bullet exploded in front of her. The fire and smoke caused from the technique cleared a second later to reveal she was completely unharmed, and a large paper wall had blocked the attack. I came here looking for Pain, and instead I end up finding you. Jiraiya smirked at the beautiful blue-haired woman. Not only have your techniques improved, but you've turned into one hell of a woman, Konan. Konan said nothing as she stared at the man who had been her sensei, and was the current sensei of her lover. She had been surprised when she first saw that their intruder was none other than Jiraiya. Though she supposed she shouldn't be. Jiraiya had a spy network almost as vast as Madara's, it was a reasonable assumption that Omegakure would eventually become suspect for holding Akatsuki. One thing Konan knew was that they were now in a bad way. The whole reason she and Naruto had agreed not to inform Jiraiya was because they both knew he would come looking for Nagato if he found out they were alive. But Nagato was no longer the man he once was, he was now Pain, a man who had lost his heart long ago and could no longer see that his goals had shifted from bringing peace to revenge. Jiraiya was unaware of her thoughts as he began speaking again. I thought you were dead, but instead, you're just a bunch of paper. So, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you're this angel people keep talking about. When Konan still said nothing, Jiraiya grunted. So who is Pain? That's none of your business, sensei, Konan said as she played her part and began floating in the air. Jiraiya tensed, wondering if he was about to have a fight on his hands. He woman who only had half a body at the moment floated up higher into the air and several thousand sheets of paper began forming out of her back, creating two large angel wings. So, that's supposed to make you an angel? Asked Jiraiya with narrowed eyes. Doesn't look like much. Does that shape bring you any benefits? Konan said nothing, however she did begin launching several thousand paper shuriken at him. Jiraiya reacted quickly and began blowing out a stream of fire to counter her attack. As the two tried to overpower each other, Konan slipped a sheet of paper behind Jiraiya and stuck it on his shoulder. The white-haired Senin's eyes widened as he felt something slap on his shoulder. Thinking it was a paper bomb, he peeled it off quick and was just about to throw it away when his eyes caught sight of it. They widened as he saw that it wasn't a paper bomb, but a message. What the hell do you think you're doing here, sensei? Jiraiya blinked in surprise, and it was only his instincts which managed to keep him from getting impaled by more paper shuriken. Or was it? These shuriken aren't getting close to hitting me, he realized with a frown. Being a ninja of his class, Jiraiya could easily tell when someone was trying to actually hurt him or not. And he could tell that Konan was trying very hard to make it look like she was trying to kill him, but she actually wasn't. It was like she was putting on a show for someone else's benefit. What was going on here? Deciding to play along for now, Jiraiya blew out several dozen large fireballs that sailed towards Conan. At the same time he slipped the sheet of paper in between the fireballs, having used the split second to scrawl a quick message using his chakra. Conan caught the message on one of her wings and discreetly read it. I'm looking for information on Akatsuki. I didn't expect to see you here. You've grown quite beautiful, my dear. Conan didn't know whether to scowl or smirk. It seemed Naruto was right and Jiraiya really was a pervert, even in battle he was trying to compliment her. She responded to his compliment with more paper shuriken, this time aiming closer to him, more specifically his male bits, causing the man to pale. She almost let her impassive face fall in amusement, but shook her head and once again slipped a message through the attacks. You shouldn't have come here, sensei. This village is much more dangerous now. I suggest you leave while you can. Jiraiya frowned, even as he sent some oil towards Conan, which coated her form liberally and made it impossible for her to use her paper jutsu. He went through several hand seals and his already lengthy hair extended to ridiculous lengths. It quickly wrapped around Conan, binding both her wings together so she could not try to use them to escape. As Jiraiya's hair wrapped around Conan, a small strand of it discreetly slipped his reply to her last note on one of her angel wings, at an angle where she could read it. I can't leave. I have to find out information on Akatsuki, and I'm guessing you know about it. Who is your leader? And what happened to Nagato and Yahiko? Conan growled in frustration as she read her former sensei's reply. This man was going to make it incredibly hard to get him out alive. She wasn't really sure what to do. Neither she nor Naruto had planned for Jiraiya coming here to look for information. They both knew it had been a possibility, but had assumed that the man wouldn't do anything for a few more years. And by the time they had hoped Akatsuki would be defeated. She was just about to use one of the more powerful jutsu Naruto had taught to her, what he called an ace in the hole jutsu. Her lover had not wanted her to rely on just her paper jutsu, feeling that paper was too easy to counter once someone realized its weakness. Thus he had taught her 5 jutsu from each element, and 5 non-elemental jutsu. She was preparing to use one of the wind jutsu he had taught her, when a familiar voice made her freeze. It's been a long time, Jiraiya-sensei. Conan's eyes widened as Pain appeared crouched on a cliff of metal pipes several dozen feet away. Damn it. I thought I had more time. She thought to herself. With Pain here things were going to swiftly go downhill. Even using just one of his paths he could defeat her, and while Jiraiya may be able to beat one, this particular path was extremely difficult to face in combat. Mainly because it was damn near impossible to actually fight it up close. Considering the situation she was now in, it was a wonder she could still keep most of her impassive mask on. Jiraiya looked at Nagato, for that was the only person it could be. He had long orange hair in a ponytail, with one bang parting off to the left in a style reminiscent of Naruto's friend Ino. He had several stud piercings along his jaw and neck, and 2 on each of his cheeks, which were connected by a thin strand of metal that went through his nose. He was wearing the traditional Akatsuki robes. Narrowing his eyes, Jiraiya said, your appearance has changed quite a bit. But I still remember those eyes. He remembered the very first time he saw those eyes, the legendary Rinnegan, back when he had been training the 3 AIM orphans. Nagato and Yahiko had been attacked while he was away. When he returned, the ninja were dead and Nagato was in a state of shock and had gained the most legendary of all dojutsu. So you are the one they call Pain, Nagato. It seems you didn't grow up as I had expected. What happened to you? You don't need to know that, Pain said. You're just an outsider, after all. Jiraiya frowned. It seems you've changed, Nagato. Pain clapped his hands together, Kuchio's no jutsu. A large summoning seal away spread out on the pipe wall behind Pain. There was a large burst of smoke, and a large crab-like creature scuttled out. Jiraiya's eyes widened as it stopped at the ledge and shot out a foamy substance from its mouth. Conan let it overtake her, knowing that at the moment she would be no good. It washed off the oil and she made a hasty getaway until she could come up with a plan to get her and Jiraiya out of this mess alive. Jiraiya on the other hand jumped into the air and flipped himself on the wall to dodge the foamy liquid. Foam huh. I should have realized he would exploit my greatest weakness. Washing away my oil with foam. The giant crap disappeared in a puff of smoke and Pain began manipulating his hands like he was conducting an orchestra. The crab summon burst out of the foam, its left pincer claw making grasping motions as it attempted to crush Jiraiya with its pincers. However, Jiraiya wasn't S-class for nothing and swiftly began making hand seals. Ranshishigami no Jutsu, Raging Lion's main technique, as he called out the name of his attack, Jiraiya's hair expanded from all sides. It quickly wrapped around the crab summon's arms, legs and torso. The Gamma Sennin stamped a foot on the wall and his hair constricted. By using his chakra, Jiraiya had hardened his hair follicles to the same density and hardness as steel. While the crab's outer shell may have been tough, even it wasn't strong enough to withstand Jiraiya's attack as it sliced through the outer shell and into the creature's fleshy interior. The crab burst into smoke as it was desummoned by the attack. Out of that smoke came more hair, this time in the shape of a large mouth. It crashed into Pain and slammed the path against the wall. The amount of force the attack generated caused the pipes to bend out and the wall to crack. Conan watched overhead, the only sign that she was worried being the way her teeth bit her lower lip. Jiraiya flexed his chakra and the hair began to recede slightly, enough that he could now see Nagato inside of his grip. Nagato. I have a few questions I want to ask you, he said in a tone that suggested he wasn't talking no for an answer. What happened to Yahiko? Conan winced at the memory the boy's name brought. She shook her head however and quickly replaced it with the memory of the man who was very similar to the bright and excitable boy. She looked over at Pain whose face was impassive as always. Ah, I do recall someone by that name, yes, Pain replied. The tone in his voice suggesting he didn't care about the name, causing Jiraiya to grunt angrily. He died a long time ago. What? He died? Jiraiya nearly joked. He looked at his old apprentice and frowned. What happened to you, Nagato? Your old self would have never been so callous. Happened. Nothing happened, Pain said without inflection. There was just war. There was too much death here. That death caused pain and that pain made me grow. What the hell are you talking about? Through pain, even a foolish child will grow up, Pain continued. Through pain, words and thoughts are controlled too. Jiraiya scowled. Are you saying that casting aside feelings for your friend makes you a man? Sensei, Pain said chittingly. You are still a man. But caught within infinite pain, I transcended humanity. What? Jiraiya said in a harsh whisper. That's right, Pain said. I went from being a man, to a god. By becoming a god, my words and thoughts become the laws of nature. Sensei, you are still just a man. Trying to comprehend my words is meaningless. As a god, I now comprehend that which I could not as a man. And because I am a god, I can understand that which was previously incomprehensible. Simply put, I've evolved beyond man. Conan had heard Pain say things like this hundreds of times before. In the past, she had always believed his words were absolute, she had been in awe of him and believed he truly had become a god. To accomplish what he had in such a short time, to create such a grand goal, to find the means and have the will to go through with his plans. Surely, someone who can do so much and have such a grand plan must be a god. Her time with Naruto had tempered that awe. She had seen the havoc Pain had truly caused, some might have believed that everything he had done was for the sake of peace. But she knew better. Pain was taking revenge on the world for causing him pain, a child lashing out at the thing that created him. And he was merciless in his revenge, he had no compassion for others, he did not fight for the sake of others, and did not care who he had to kill to get what he wanted. He said he wanted peace, but how can there be peace when the man creating it did not have the compassion necessary to help those who would be ruled under this peace? For all his power, Pain was not a god, but a simple man who had lost sight within his own delusions. And while it broke Conan's heart, she knew there was not much she could do now. Except ensure that Pain died so that Nagato could rest in peace. Jiraiya kept his face blank as Pain finished his monologue. And what are your intentions now? Pain closed his eyes. To cleanse this world in meaningless strife. That's the work of God. If that's your goal, why are you collecting the Biju? Asked Jiraiya. You're going to die anyways, that is the only reason I will tell you my goal. At Pain's words Jiraiya's eyes widened. By using the sealed Biju, I will create a new forbidden jutsu. With only a single use of that jutsu, even an entire nation can be wiped out in an instant. It's the ultimate forbidden jutsu weapon. I will give this jutsu to the nations. Eventually, they will use it. Hundreds of millions of people will die in an instant. After witnessing the display, they will be terrified, they will all know pain. That terror will act as a deterrent. The conflicts will vanish. You could say the current world is still not moving towards a state of equilibrium. Pain will force the world to grow up. Like the old me thought, for the world to move forward and grow up, divine help is necessary. This world is still but a mere child. Conan's lips became a thin line as she listened to Nagato's words. Being able to actually hear his plans without the illusions of Pain's perfection in her mind, she could now see what Naruto saw. A weapon like that would not bring peace, not unless Pain was seeking the peace of the grave. If he gave weapons of such devastating power to the elemental nations, they would use it. Whole nations would be extinguished, an untold number of people would die. And when those who survived, those who had loved ones killed at the hands of that weapon, they would rage. They would hate, and they too would use the weapon and wipe out the nation that attacked them. The hatred would spread, as more and more nations used the weapon to destroy their enemies in revenge. Soon after the world would become a sterile wasteland, nothing would exist after that. There would be no war, but there would be no one left to enjoy the peace Pain's weapon brought. Apparently, Jiraiya thought the same thing as well, because he actually began to laugh. You think that by destroying the world, you'll make it grow faster. That is the lamest, most idiotic thing I've ever heard. You won't be making anything grow. You'll just kill this world and everyone in it. I guess in a way you'll create peace. If the peace of the grave is what you're looking for. Pain just shook his head. You just can't understand, sensei. You are still just a regular human. And that's how I know I'm right. Jiraiya shot back. Because unlike you, mister, I've transcended humanity, I still am human, and as a human I understand other humans. You create that weapon, people will use it, and when the few people who see that weapon used, and realize that their loved ones are dead, they will grow terrified and angry, and then they will use that weapon in retaliation. As more and more people use the weapon, they will destroy the world, leaving it nothing more than a graveyard. You're a fool, Nagato. That's what you are, and I'm ashamed of how you've become. Pain's eyes narrowed. It matters not what you think. Only my will, the will of God matters. Pain quickly disappeared within a kawarimi and appeared several feet away. Over here, sensei. To me you're an insignificant child whose growth was stunted. Another summon. Jiraiya said as he saw Pain standing atop a massive chameleon. I have to admit, hearing a kid like you telling me that I and the world need to grow up. It's rather funny coming from a brat like you. You say you're God, but I'm no longer a human either. He said as he made hand seals for his own summoning jutsu. The smoke amassed around him. Flooded by anger, I cried tears of blood. The Gamma Sennin of the legendary Sannin. The Gamma Yukai of Mount Mayuboku. The great Jiraiya-sama. His speech was cut off as he fell face first onto the surface he had been standing on. Still floating in the skies above until she could come up with a way to get Jiraiya out of this fucked up situation alive, without revealing her position as a spy, Conan felt like face palming as she saw Jiraiya fall flat on his face. And this is the man who trained Naruto-kun and I, she thought lamentingly. You really haven't grown up at all, have you? Pain said with disdain. You're still just as clumsy and childish as ever. Jiraiya pushed himself up until he was on his hands and knees. Damn it, Gamaiken-san, don't move around so much when I'm striking my pose. The massive toad had clothing on that was very similar to Gamabunta except his was magenta in color. He had horns on his head, black markings going down his face, and he held two objects in each hand, a shield in one and a Sasumata in the other. Don't blame me, it's your fault you tripped over your own feet like a clumsy idiot. No respect. Jiraiya muttered as he rubbed his face. Soon Pain and his massive chameleon came charging forward. We won't be able to go easy in this fight. We'll need to use everything we have on this guy right from the start. I'm going to use Sennin mode for this. Gamaiken looked up at the summoner on his head in shock. What? Jiraiya, are you really going to use that so soon? Is this guy really that powerful? He's likely gonna be one of the toughest opponents we'll ever face. Jiraiya said, that's why I'm summoning the two great sage toads. Though it's going to take a while before I can gather the chakra to do so. I won't be able to split my hands during that time. I'm going to need you to buy me some time. Think you can do that? Gamaiken nodded. You've got it, Jiraiya. I'm not that strong, but I'll give you my best. In the skies above, Conan watched as the battle began to progress. She had to admit, Despite being much older now and still acting like a complete fool, Jiraiya was still a very powerful ninja and seemed capable of holding his own against most opponents. Were he facing her, Conan had no doubt she would not be able to win. However, it was becoming obvious to her that Pain was on a whole other level. It was going to take considerable skill just for him to make it out alive. Jiraiya watched as Nagato and the chameleon summon disappeared. His eyes narrowed. I wonder where the hell he found this summon. Gamaken-san. It looks like we're going to need to use that barrier jutsu to find him. Right, it looks like we're in for a tough battle, Gamaken said. It seemed that Pain had figured out his plan however, since he switched out his chameleon summons with a three-headed dog that went on the attack as soon as it appeared. Jiraiya had to channel more chakra to his feet to keep from falling off as Gamaken began jumping and dodging the attacks. Through some fancy footwork on Gamaken's part, they managed to pin the dog to the wall via stabbing it with the giant toad Sasumata. Jiraiya cheered, I don't know why you keep dissing yourself Gamaken-san, you're actually pretty good. Whatever celebration Jiraiya might have done was cut short as the three-headed dog somehow managed to split itself into three more dogs. What the hell? He yelled, only to watch in growing horror as the dogs split even further, becoming 6 dogs. Now that's just not fair. Gamaken soon began to battle with the now 6 one-headed dogs, jumping around as he used his Sasumata and shield to fight them off as he jumped from wall to wall. He managed to bat most of the dog summons away, however one managed to get through. The dog hit Gamaken and sent him flying through the wall. Are you alright, Gamaken-san? Asked Jiraiya as his summon managed to hang onto one of the poles. Think you can move without jostling me so much? I'll try my best, Gamaken said. That's all I can ask for. Jiraiya frowned as he looked at the now dozen-headed dog, the former dogs having melded together. I really have no clue what we're dealing with here. I wonder if these dogs are bound to some kind of self-replicating summoning technique. Either way, I think we should get out of here for now. The pole Gamaken was holding began to loosen and fall. Let's fight them in a location of our choosing. Right. Gamaken leapt away as soon as he hit the ground. Heading off as the dog split one of its heads and went off after them. As they were running, Jiraiya's eyes widened as he caught sight of a still camouflaged Nagato hanging off a wall. Unfortunately, he could do anything due to the dog chasing after him. Gamaken moved quickly, luring the dogs into a place of their choosing. They soon managed to lure the dogs into a dead end. Jiraiya smirked. Well, it looks like we're trapped, Gamaken-san. He eyed the dogs as they prepared to attack. They'll likely try and split up again, so get ready. The dogs did split up, making an attempt to attack Jiraiya and Gamaken from all angles. However, the large toad summon had some pretty slick moves up its sleeves. Spinning his Sasumata, Gamaken was able to deflect all of the dogs. When the last one attacked Gamaken, the large toad bashed it across the top of its head, smashing it into the ground. He jumped up and began looking for a place to recuperate from the wounds he received at the dog's hands. However, before they could get far, a giant drill-beaked bird came at Gamaken, who lifted his shield to block. It kept him from taking immediate damage, but it didn't keep him from being slammed into a wall hard enough that the pipes on it burst. Jiraiya winced as he was jostled around. Whenever I plan to attack, he hides himself. This really sucks. Jiraiya tried his best to think up a strategy to fight, because if he kept going like this he wouldn't even live long enough to use Sennin mode. I don't understand. With the Rinnegan, Nagato is capable of using all 6 chakra natures, so why is he just using summons? A massive ox rushed at him and Gamaken. Gamaken, you can return home now, I'm ready. Gamaken returned to the mountain of the toads just as the ox plowed Jiraiya into a wall, kicking up a cloud of smoke. However, it ended up with the ox blown away as if it were a lightweight. Kid, why do ya always summon us to annoying places like this? No wonder Bunta is always so angry at you. An elderly voice came from the hole that Jiraiya and the ox had made in the wall. Don't be like that, Ma. You know Jiraiya always has a reason for summoning us. Came another elderly voice from inside of the wall. For crying out loud, be quiet, Pa. Sorry for summoning you both here, Fukasaku-sama, Shima-sama. Jiraiya said apologetically. Shima spoke again, but brat, didn't you always say you disliked this form because it made your face ugly and chased away the girls? That's why you only use it when fighting the other brat. Jiraiya chuckled. Naruto would be pissed to hear you call him brat. Besides, there's no choice but for me to just deal with it. I am fighting an opponent with the Rinnegan after all. The Raikudu's eyes. To think it really exists. Well, in that case it can't be helped. Jiraiya's form could be seen from the shadows of the hole in the wall with two small toads on both of his shoulders. Looks like we've got to fight with you. Jiraiya's smile was grim as he walked out of the hole for Pain to see his new form. I'm glad I can count on you too. It's good to know a guy has friends.